corners of the earth and the far corridors of history. Dateline, World War II. 14 July 1940. For decades, a dispute has simmered between the United States and Japan in the Pacific. The Japanese see themselves as a superior race, divinely preordained to dominate East Asia. The United States, which holds as territories the islands of Hawaii and the Philippines, believes that Asia, under Japanese dominance, will be as closed to foreign trade as Japan historically has been. Now, in Japan, a new government forms. The cabinet is made up of militant nationalists interested primarily in conquest. Within weeks, the cabinet sets its foreign policy goals: victory in China, expansion of the Japanese empire southward, and a rolling back of American influence in the region. On 27 September, Japan signs what is called the Tripartite Pact with Nazi Germany and Italy. The pact requires no direct assistance to Hitler's aggression in Europe, but the Japanese hope that the threat of global war will intimidate the United States. What the pact does, in fact, is contribute to an anti-Japan backlash in the United States. President Roosevelt extends loans to China so that it might more effectively fight the Japanese invaders, and makes no secret of his willingness to fight to protect American interests in the Philippines. At the same time, in their quest for expansion, the Japanese attempt to extort strategic minerals from the Dutch East Indies. If the East Indies don't pay tribute of oil and aluminum-rich bauxite, Japan will invade the islands. There are those in the Japanese government who believe that an invasion of the East Indies might provoke an American response. The militarists in the cabinet order a large intelligence operation directed against the American Pacific Fleet, designed to track ship movements and capabilities. The diplomatic impasse between the United States and Japan continues, and in January 1941, the commander-in-chief of the Japanese Navy suggests that a preemptive strike on the U.S. fleet at Hawaii might be necessary. The thought of open warfare with the United States is chilling, and Emperor Hirohito, while not vetoing the suggestion, requests that efforts to resolve the nation's differences diplomatically be stepped up. In May 1941, Thailand signs a treaty promising not to ally with any other nation against Japan. By withdrawing as a potential bulwark against Japanese expansion, Thailand opens the door for Japanese occupation of the adjacent southern half of Indochina. Japan does not hesitate. Japanese military preparations for all-out war continue through summer and fall 1941. On 5 November, an imperial conference decides to make a final effort to reach a diplomatic peace with America, but the militarists insist that the negotiations not be drawn out indefinitely. If a settlement on Japanese terms is not reached by 1 December, the conference decides, Japan's military would begin their southern push. This decision to advance toward and presumably into American-held territory carries with it the strong implication that the Japanese will attack the United States closer to home, in Hawaii. On 20 November, the Japanese ambassador in Washington presents the final Japanese peace offer. If the United States ends the trade embargo with Japan, frees Japanese assets in the U.S., supplies the Japanese with oil, and allows the rising sun a free hand to conclude the war in China, the Japanese will withdraw from Indochina and allow free trade in the Dutch East Indies. Though the generals in Tokyo think the proposal reasonable, it is received in Washington with a decided lack of enthusiasm. Though the United States knows from decoded Japanese messages that a rejection of the offer will likely result in an early Japanese attack, the idea of actually assisting the Japanese adventurism in China is sufficiently repugnant that the offer is left to languish. The United States introduces a counter-proposal on 26 November demanding Japanese recognition of the Chinese government of Chiang Kai-shek. On 1st December, as the United States awaits a reply from the Japanese government, the Japanese embassy in Washington receives a chilling message. The diplomats are ordered to burn documents and destroy cryptographic equipment. The diplomats do as they are told, knowing full well what the orders imply about the future of American-Japanese diplomatic relations. December 1940, British units in Egypt launch an offensive against the Italian 10th Division. The ensuing battle is a rout. The undertrained, poorly led Italian troops are easily overrun, and within a matter of hours, 38,000 have been wounded, captured, or killed. English casualties number less than 700. The British continue to drive west in hot pursuit of the retreating Italians. By 22 January, they take the key deep-water port of Tobruk. The Italians retreat in such disorder, they leave behind a seawater distillation plant, essential to fielding an army in the harsh Libyan desert. Having occupied Tobruk, the English strike inland in a daring 200-mile cross-desert thrust to Beta Foam, successfully cutting off the reeling Italian 10th. For England, it is a much-needed victory. After the crushing blow they sustained in northern France and the daily doses of devastation delivered to their cities by the Luftwaffe, they have now given the invincible Axis a taste of its own medicine. In Berlin, Hitler is quickly becoming disgusted with his Italian counterpart, Benito Mussolini. Mussolini had assured him that Italian troops could defeat the British in Egypt without help from the Wehrmacht. Now, far from being beaten, the British are driving into central Libya, threatening German plans for the invasion of Greece. The Fuhrer tells Hermann Goering to ready his Luftwaffe for duty in North Africa and enlists the services of the young Major General who had proven so effective in northern France, Erwin Rommel. Given command of the newly created Afrika Corps, Rommel arrives in Tripoli on 12 February and immediately begins preparations to turn the tide back in favor of the Axis. Both the German and British high commands expect Rommel to maintain a defensive position, a mere check on the British drive to the west. Rommel has other ideas. Instead of viewing the harsh Libyan desert as a hindrance to combat operations, he believes the vast open space offers tremendous opportunity to those bold enough to take advantage of it. On 24 March, the British, who believe it will be mid-May before Rommel is in a position to strike, are caught off guard by a heavy raid near El Al-Ghilah. Rommel, sensing that this is his moment, disobeys Hitler's orders to remain on the defensive and launches an all-out attack. Rommel's strategy proves to be devastatingly effective. The vastness of the desert allows his panzer units to utilize their mobility to an unprecedented degree. Supported by the Luftwaffe, the Afrika Corps drives the British back in disarray. Having surrounded Tobruk, Rommel continues driving west until mid-April, when overextended supply lines force him to halt his drive near the Egyptian border. In 1 month, the Desert Fox, as his opponents have begun calling him, has retaken what it took the English army 4 months to gain. In mid-May, the British mount a counteroffensive designed to relieve the defenders of Tobruk, who are still surrounded by the Germans. Positioning his defenses in Halfaya Pass, Rommel uses 88mm anti-aircraft guns to destroy the advancing British armor before the tanks are close enough to return fire. Once again, the English taste defeat. Tobruk causes no end of grief for Rommel as well. Both he and the British realize the port is crucial to a continued German drive into Egypt. Throughout the summer, Rommel attempts to crack the city's defensive ring, but with no success. Although the desert is ideal for Rommel's armored warfare tactics, its hot, barren landscape makes supporting his army a nightmare. Ammunition, food, water, all are in short supply. His choice is simple: take Tobruk or withdraw. On 18 November, the British, who have been resupplied and reinforced, launch another offensive to relieve the besieged port city. The fighting is savage, the conditions brutal, yet despite suffering heavy losses, English forces break through the German ring and reach the city on 27 November. Rommel, realizing he cannot continue to fight without access to the sea, decides to withdraw. Although the British have secured Tobruk, they realize Rommel is far from beaten. The Desert Fox has proven himself a sly and dangerous enemy, and it is obvious his withdrawal is no chaotic retreat. It is rather a tactical maneuver. He is merely biding his time, waiting for the right moment to renew his assault and finish the job of driving the Allies from North Africa. June 1941, the roar of artillery and the rumble of tanks mark the end of the unlikely pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. As he has before, Adolf Hitler unleashes his blitzkrieg on a nation with which he is supposedly at peace. Known as Operation Barbarossa, the German offensive into Russia is the largest in history. 3 million men pour through massive holes punched by panzer divisions in the Russian defenses. The German offensive is divided into 3 wings. The main thrust of the attack is given to Field Marshal von Bach's Army Group Center. They are to drive east in a giant pincers movement towards Smolensk, entrapping and crushing large elements of the Red Army. With this done, they are to push on to Moscow and raise the Nazi banner high above the walls of the Kremlin. As in Poland and France, the German blitzkrieg routs the Russian defenders, driving them back in utter confusion. On 29 June, Guderian's and General Hot's forces meet up near Minsk, encircling more than 40 Russian divisions and taking over 300,000 prisoners. In the south, Lvov is overrun, and the 1st Panzer Group is already making advances on Kiev. On 3 July, Stalin broadcasts a message to the entire nation. He says the current conflict is a people's war, not just one for the Red Army. He calls for a scorched earth policy, leaving nothing for the advancing Germans. By 5 August, the Army Group Center has encircled over 700,000 Soviet troops at Smolensk. On 12 August, Hitler issues Directive 34, ordering army groups north and south to continue their drives to Leningrad and the Crimea. But he also orders, against the advice of his generals, that Army Group Center halt and assist the other forces. The German generals want to continue the drive for Moscow, virtually ensuring its fall before the Russian winter sets in. Russian roads, bad enough in favorable weather, become impassable in snow. The generals realize that the key to their success is mobility. Without it, they fear, the offensive will bog down and they will find themselves fighting in an environment for which they are totally unprepared. On 30 August, Army Group North cuts the last railroad link between Leningrad and the rest of the Soviet Union. The next day, they are within artillery range of the city itself. In the south, Guderian, who is driven south after the encirclement at Smolensk, joins in the assault on Kiev. On 12 September, his forces link up with General Kleist's, entrapping over 600,000 Soviet troops 100 miles west of the city. For all the good news, the German General Staff is most preoccupied with weather. The first snow falls on the Eastern Front. On 19 September, after losing 500,000 men in its defense, the Russians are forced to cede Kiev to Army Group South. For the Germans, the victory is bittersweet at best. The fierce Russian defense of the city has reduced the Nazi forces by over 100,000. One German general notes that, unlike the Poles and the French, the Russians are fighting to the last man. On 30 September, Guderian's 2nd Panzer Army, which has moved back north, begins the drive east from Moscow. He is joined on 2 October by the 3rd and 4th Panzer Groups and the 2nd, 4th, and 9th Armies. Though the advance on Moscow continues, the closer the Germans get to the city, the tougher the fighting becomes. Accustomed to winning staggering victories at little cost, they are now bogged down and taking heavy casualties. By mid-November, with hard winter descending around them, German morale is at an all-time low. Their soldiers do not have proper clothing to protect them from the cold, and their equipment is becoming less and less reliable. Winter may well be Russia's best ally. The Red Army, reeling from the speed of the German advance, now has time to regroup. They permit the Germans to advance slowly on Moscow while building their reserve forces on the outer flanks. On 2 December, forward German units advance to within sight of the Kremlin. Their divisions are at half strength. Their men are demoralized and frostbitten, and their equipment is failing miserably in the harsh Russian winter. Their long drive stalls. On 6 December, the Russian hammer drops. Along a 500-mile front around Moscow, the Soviets launch a massive counteroffensive. Devised by Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the Russian plan is to cut through the panzer groups on the wings of Army Group Center, then isolate and destroy it. The overextended, weakened German forces crumble under the onslaught of the fresh Russian troops. Hitler, for the first time, sees his mighty Wehrmacht stagger. Facing a rejuvenated Red Army, the German High Command looks forward with trepidation to the long Russian winter. June 1940, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, following massive loss of war material at Dunkirk, turns to the United States for assistance. The American War Department sells Britain over $43 million worth of supplies: guns, planes, ammunition, trucks, all the tools of war. Under the cash and carry policy in place since 9 November 1939, the British must pay for the goods before using them in their battle against Germany. Within a few months, however, the war effort depletes the British exchequer to such a degree that they no longer have the cash to replace the precious materials being so rapidly consumed in the war. Britain's resistance to the Nazi plague sweeping across Europe is in danger of faltering for lack of sustenance. In his fireside chat on 17 December, President Franklin Roosevelt states his intention in the strongest terms yet to assist Britain's war effort. He changes the cash and carry policy to Lend Lease, providing weapons and munitions without demanding immediate payment. Roosevelt argues that were his neighbor's house on fire, he would immediately loan his garden hose without demanding payment beforehand. It is not simply a matter of watching out for one's neighbor, but of preventing the spread of fire to one's own house. Nearly 3 months of heated debate in Congress follows, and on 12 March, Roosevelt's Lend-Lease proposal becomes a reality. The president now has the power to manufacture, sell, lend, transfer, lease, or exchange any war material to the government of any country whose defense the president deems vital for the defense of the United States. On 27 March, Congress authorizes the first appropriation for Lend-Lease, providing Britain instant access to $7 billion in American goods. The British are ecstatic. Churchill proclaims Lend-Lease an inspiring act of faith, a monument of generous and far-reaching statesmanship, as well as the most unsordid act in history. In the United States, Lend-Lease provides 2 mammoth challenges. The first is the task of moving hundreds of thousands of tons of material across the ocean. The second, and more serious challenge, is in producing it. Even with factories running around the clock, not enough tanks, planes, and guns can be forged to fully meet Roosevelt's demands for both increases in American strength and exports. As industry gears up, many are left wondering, if war comes to America, will America have the ability to fight?